I think it's fair to say that Avengers Endgame is just one hell of a movie. It's 3 hours and 58 seconds long, and by the end of it, you are a mess. You are emotionally drained, you are mentally drained, and it's not a bad thing. It's a good feeling to have when you come to the closure of 11 years of storytelling and what ultimately is going to open the door for the next 10 years or so of storytelling. But what really always cracks me up in regards to the aftermath of movies like this are op-eds like this one we see here from Screenrant by Molly Freeman, titled "Was Underused," or spoiler, was underused in Avengers Endgame. And of course, they're referring to Captain Marvel here. Now, Molly's got a bone to pick with Captain Marvel, with how they did it, with everything else. So let's take a look here at what she has to say. At least her opening thesis. Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame focus on the original 6 Avengers and a few other heroes, but Captain Marvel was particularly underused in the movie. To its credit, Avengers Endgame was tasked with wrapping up the story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, which kicked off more than 10 years ago with Iron Man. As such, Avengers Endgame needed to be the culmination of 22 movies and 11 years of storytelling, which is a high bar to meet, and there was bound to be disappointing aspects. Although Avengers Endgame movie reviews have been largely positive, there have also been some confusion about the Avengers time travel plot. Plus, with so many characters participating in the Avengers Endgame big battle sequence in the third act, there are sure to be fans who don't think their favorite hero got enough screen time. So, except for Thanos, who reverts to a one-dimensional villain after Avengers Infinity War, spent so much time developing him as a character. One such character who doesn't get enough time to shine in Avengers Endgame is Captain Marvel, despite only recently making her MCU debut. So what kind of complaining is that? I guess that's complaining. Thanos was reverted to a one-dimensional character. Yeah, because he had 4 years that we saw him with in the last movie, and that character, spoiler alert, is dead. So the character development that he went through from getting the Power Stone, or at least going after Ronan the Accuser and all that jazz, from 2014 to 2018, we already knew that existed. Going back to him being more of a tyrannical person and not knowing what the outcome was for him specifically was going to alter his reality and then also alter the character growth. I thought it was pretty cool that we got to go back to a more tyrannical Thanos rather than the one that Thor beheaded on Titan 2 or whatever the hell that planet was called in the beginning of the movie. But she's complaining about that, and she's complaining about Captain Marvel, who doesn't get enough screen time after only just making her MCU debut. Yeah, she made her debut in a solo movie less than 2 months ago. So what were you expecting when you yourself say that they had the task of wrapping up 22 movies over the span of 11 years, right? So, but later on, she goes on to talk about she understands that the writers would have to keep the story focused on the 6 characters, i.e. the original Avengers, since it's the last time all 6 will be together on screen. And considering the rave reviews of Avengers Endgame, particularly how it handles Tony and Steve's story, that was ultimately the right decision. But it still reveals a lack of awareness about how popular Captain Marvel would be after her solo movie. Does she think that these movies are made overnight? I'm legitimately asking this question. And she is not like a newbie at Screenrant. She's an editor at Screenrant. Like, she writes for them all the time. She knows how movies are. She knows how they're made. This is made not overnight. They actually shot Endgame before they shot Captain Marvel. That's been well documented. That's been well known. So you're upset that Carol Danvers only got a couple scenes in the movie because she was in a popular film that preceded it? Okay. Like, you know that it takes 2 years or so to make a movie like this, if not longer in some cases? That the size and the scope and the magnitude of the tale of Avengers Endgame on top of Infinity War, having shot both films back to back, a massive undertaking, a massive endeavor that cost upwards of $1 billion to produce. And you're like, oh, well, Captain Marvel did her good on her movie, so why wasn't she in this movie more? That is the quintessential privilege complaint, isn't it? Well, you made $1 billion over there. Why didn't you make $1 billion over here? It's so stupid. And these kind of op-eds are one of the reasons why this fight keeps happening. But she goes on because it keeps getting better. Something similar happened with Infinity War and Black Panther. The latter movie just opened a few months before Infinity War, and Black Panther was a massive success, becoming a cultural phenomenon in its own right. As such, fans were excited to see King T'Challa and the residents of Wakanda return in Infinity War, but they weren't in it for very much until the end with the big battle sequence. The lack of Black Panther characters in Infinity War seemed to come down to Marvel Studios not being able to predict just how popular the movie would become. That's not true at all. And there's no evidence to support that. Her argument here doesn't even remotely back that up. Yes, Black Panther went on to gross $1.3 billion, and Captain Marvel grossed over $1.14 billion, I believe. And that's a lot of money. That's good money for Marvel Studios and good money for Disney, showing that these franchises have weight behind it. The thing with Black Panther, though, is that for one, it opened during Black History Month. It opened at a time when there were no black superheroes on the big screen. On the small screen, you had Black Lightning on the CW, which apparently is doing quite well, but it did well because people wanted to see it. There's that, and it was a good remake of The Lion King. To be fair, Black Panther in and of itself is a good movie, but it is very derivative story-wise, whereas Captain Marvel is very derivative of just a boring film because nothing happens in that movie, but it does have the added benefit of opening up so close to the big Avengers film, right? So she says here, it opened up, a few months before. No, it opened up mid-February 2018, and it was less than, a little over 2 months later before Infinity War. So what you have here is the slingshot effect. The slingshot effect that is one of the things that helped propel Captain Marvel to making, I think, becoming number 2 over this past weekend, right? Slingshot effects work, especially when it comes to Marvel movies. It doesn't matter if they're good or if they're bad. You could have probably released Ant-Man and the Wasp at the same time as Captain Marvel and Black Panther, which were separated by about, 3 weeks at most, and probably had it do just about the same amount of money earned, because that is how these things work. Now, she goes on to complain. Now, we've seen the same thing happen with Captain Marvel. Carol received her own solo movie less than 2 months before Endgame hit theaters, but then she sat up most of the action in the team-up movie. Captain Marvel does get a few moments to shine, just as Black Panther, Okoye, Shuri, and M'Baku did in Avengers Infinity War, but there's still a disconnect between the huge amount of popularity Captain Marvel garnered from fans of her solo movie and her incredibly small role in Avengers Endgame. But I'd like to just kind of remind the audience at home that Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame were not about Captain Marvel, nor were they about Black Panther. They were about the Avengers, the characters that we'd seen established in 2012 and had gone on this 7-year journey to their ultimate conclusion. This was their story to tell. Why are you trying to shoehorn in a character that ultimately didn't even need to be there in the first place? Captain Marvel could have ultimately appeared as a solo film following Endgame. And it would have, and her not even being in Endgame at all would have ultimately had no impact on it as a whole, with the exception of having to figure out another way for Tony and Nebula to get back without having that Jesus moment that she got. And then also Thanos' ship would have to be destroyed by another metric. And of course, that would have been something they could have done as well. Her coming in both the beginning and the end ultimately were just like, hey, she's still here. We have to use her. So let's put her in somewhere. Like, that's really what it boils down to. I think it would have been a better testament to her popularity. If there is popularity there, that would happen after if the movie would have been released after Endgame. But to complain that she was not being featured heavily enough in a movie not about her is just funny to me. It's funny that there's that you spent time, Molly, writing this op-ed that I have to spend time responding to because it's so poorly done. And you're trying to make a case here. I know the case you're trying to make. It just doesn't work. It says here, certainly, as previously stated, it makes sense for Avengers Endgame to focus more on the character whose storylines in the film is wrapping up. Oh, okay. So you are clearly aware that your own argument is just fangirl bullshit. At least you can admit that. But the focus on the past means that Avengers Endgame doesn't give us much time setting up what's to come in the MCU. And it didn't. It technically, I mean, yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming or Far From Home is going to technically be the ending of phase 3, but really to most people, this is the end of phase 3. And so not giving us a tease for what's coming next, ultimately really nails home the film, the ending of the film, what happened in the ending of the movie, the finality of it, the finality of some of the main characters' storylines, would be undone. It would be completely ignored if they would have focused on the future. That's the reason why there's no post-credit scene. You know, like, I believe you are smart enough to recognize this, but I also believe that you're smart enough that you need to know to create some clickbait in order to get some, to get your quota for the week is what I'm thinking here. Really, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, everything about the movie is meant to signal its end. Oh, again, you completely acknowledge the BS of your own argument, which is just so funny. From Tony's death scene in Endgame to the lack of post-credit scene. But if Captain Marvel is meant to be a key figure in the MCU going forward, Avengers Endgame should have featured her at least a little bit more than the movie did. No, they shouldn't have featured her at all. At all. I'm not saying she detracted from the film. I'm saying you could remove her from the movie, and all things considered, it would still end the way it ended. I mean, she was kind of no match for Thanos, who even though he headbutted her, then took off the Power Stone and Hadoukened her in the face to knock her away from him. Like, he could figure out a way to fight her because she's not that smart. Her character is not that smart. She really isn't that smart. If you watch Captain Marvel, she kind of bungles her way through it. Not to say she's a bad character, but it's just the way that she's been portrayed thus far is really kind of not good, especially if you want better writing in these movies, which we all do. But to complain that she wasn't utilized enough. Come on. I'm gonna drop the word again, privilege. You're really pulling a privilege card here that you shouldn't. Captain Marvel is underused and underdeserved since she's meant to be the leading character in the MCU in Phase 4. At least fans have a Captain Marvel sequel and hopefully many more appearances from Carol Danvers to look forward to after her lack of role in Endgame. God, that's so snitty. It's very snitty. I'm going to quote William Barr from yesterday. Look, Molly, I get it. You want Captain Marvel to be in this movie more. I get it. It's fine. But she's got more movies to come. They want her to lead like the next 5 to 10 years. And by grossing over $1 billion in the box office in the span of like 8 weeks, in less than 8 weeks, hell, less than a month, actually, really, or I think it was a little over a month and a half or something like that. She hit the $1 billion mark. Obviously, they are planning to they're announcing more. We'll see at Comic-Con when they announce Phase 4 that in 2021, we will see a Captain Marvel 2. And then, of course, when they tie into the next Avengers movie, maybe an A-Force film, we will be seeing a lot more in regards to Carol Danvers. What you fail to get here, what you fail to grasp, at least in regards to this entire, clickbait article, is that the way the Russos handled Captain Marvel was the only way they could handle Captain Marvel. You're literally asking people who have been tasked with wrapping up 22 films and an innumerable amount of storylines to bring in a character who just made her own appearance and then use her in a way that is not going to feel cheap to the ending that it gave us. They gave you a good Captain Marvel moment in the movie. You got 2, if you think about it, right? You got the whole Thanos ship being taken out, and you got the whole scene with all the women in the MCU protecting her, which literally made no sense considering the fact that she's indestructible. So they're like, she's got coverage means nothing. It meant nothing. It was a cool scene. It was a cool looking shot. But it meant nothing to the story. You should be talking about that, talking about how she's overpowered for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And going forward, they're really going to need to tone her down if they want to make her more relatable. If not, while she did well on the first outing, with no Avengers movie to slingshot up to, I don't believe she's going to be able to pull in the same amount of money coming into it. Black Panther had the ability to at least run for Best Picture, which was absolutely a mistake, and it didn't win anything outside of costumes, I believe, which that I felt it was worthy of winning. But that's ultimately where we find ourselves here with this character. There's nothing about Captain Marvel that's going to go up for the Oscars. No one's talking about it going up for Best Picture or Best Actress. Brie Larson was okay. She gave her best to a really piss poor script for Captain Marvel that the Russos bettered in this one by having her be in the movie only in a limited capacity. I get you like Carol Danvers, but this movie was great the way it was. Don't shit on it because you're upset that she wasn't in it for more than she was. It's pointless complaining. It is. It's just pointless complaining. But anyway, I leave it to you guys. Your thoughts, your opinions. Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll talk